Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
And
Right.
96, and I think that's when I stumbled upon you in Italy. I think it was with
Okay.
Idris Muhammad and Dennis Irvin, I think, right? No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
I
killing
was.
band.
Thank you. That was fun. I was
Yeah.
kind of subbing for Larry Goldings
Yeah.
because I remember when because he ran into there was a bit of a conflict, and then so I kind of was brought in last minute during the middle of the tour, and
Oh,
he
wow,
was saying,
okay.
"Do you and because they were already out there. It's a long story we don't need to go into, but he said, "You play organ," and I said, "Yeah, but I mean I'm used to playing organ like Farfisa organ and rock and roll bands when I was in high school." So yeah, but it was fun. I played a couple songs on B3, but I stuck mostly to the piano and organ a bit. But it was a good band, yeah.
Yeah, man. Dennis Irvin, man, what a
Yeah, I
bass
miss
player. And
him.
Idris also. I mean, like, yeah, those guys. Kill
Oh
it.
yeah.
But I wanted to start our talk with. I've been listening to the last album you did with Boris Kozlov.
Sure
Thing, and man,
thing.
it's sure thing. It's a nice thing nice to hear that you did some of the old tunes. I love E. Like I remember I transcribed this tune when it came out like years ago.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
like,
cool.
It was so fast to play it. I mean, like, but you did such a nice version with just bass. I'm kind of used with drums on that songs,
yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, how did this record happen, by the way? And I know you and Boris go way back, right, with Opus 5 and even.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons we did all the songs. We did all the songs that we've been playing over the years, and we weren't sure. We weren't really thinking album. We were thinking, well, maybe we can put this out. I guess in the back of our mind. But Mike Sim, we did at Mike Sim's house, and Mike Sim. I don't know if you know Mike Sim, saxophonist. The three of us played together with the Mingus Big Band.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes Mike does that, and he's a tenor player, a good tenor player. And then Boris just called me and said, "Mike's setting up a studio in his house, and he has a really nice piano. Do you just want to go play, and we'll record it and see what happens?" So that's basically what we did. And then over the Boris and I have played together in many different groups, such as the Mingus Big Band, some of my gigs, and a bunch of other groups. So with people like Jonathan Blake on drums and Donald Edwards.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sometimes on drums too. So from the Mingus Big Band. So when the pandemic hit, then since nobody was doing anything, I was trying to find something to do.
Yeah.
And since I already had one CD out on High Note Records, I told them, "Oh well, there's I told them, I have a CD ready to go. Actually, if you want to hear it." So I played it for High Note, and they liked it. So that's how it became a real record. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful because usually I hear you in trio format or like maybe with horns. It's so nice to hear you in duo, without drums. It's like intimate and beautiful, man.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And I've been doing a lot of that recently at Mesro. I mean,
sure.
Even before the pandemic, because they do a lot of duos there, so it's kind of perfect for that kind of a situation. Sometimes they have drums at Mesro, but usually it's duos.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to play without. I mean, I love playing with drums, and I've been
I
fortunate
know that. Yeah,
to play with many drummers like Roy Haynes.
I'll ask you about
etc.
that definitely.
You will get to that later,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a nice change just
yeah,
playing because you don't have the drummer obviously to. You got to keep all the time yourself. It's a nice challenge.
yeah. It sounds beautiful. I mean, also
Thanks.
satellite by Coltrane and that stuff, man. It's just you seem to float through that like with such an ease. It's like
Oh,
beautiful,
thanks.
beautiful
Thanks.
to hear.
Actually, I did there's a record I did on Triloca Records. That's probably a little bit hard to find these days. I guess it's probably on YouTube,
Hmm.
it was on Triloca Records from L.A. It was the label, and we do a trio version of Satellite with Billy Hart on drums
Oh man, yeah.
and Ed Howard on bass, but I'm playing synthesizers.
Seriously? Oh wow, I
So
have to
it's
check it
sort
out.
of like it's funny because it's like Coltrane meets whatever Emerson, Lake and Plummer,
Yeah,
or
sure.
something. So it's kind of I like taking different things. I like taking things from different places and sort of throwing them together and see what will happen. Like playing Colt because the bass lays out at one point and
Yeah.
it's just synthesizer and Billy
And
Hart
Billy, wow, man.
trading,
Yeah,
playing Coltrane changes, like
yeah,
giant steps
yeah,
changes.
yeah,
So it's pretty funny.
yeah. I love that. I love that. But I wanted to ask you about, I mentioned the tune E, and
Yeah.
there's some other songs, like Water or Betrayal, especially Almost Twilight. I love that record. Like,
Oh, thanks.
I wrote out some tunes and
Almost Twilight. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not trying to remember which one. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, with Patitucci and Tain and
Oh, right, that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's like this tune Water and some other songs.
Water, yeah, I still do. I've been starting to play that one again
The
because
five
people
eighths
like that one.
interlude. I mean the intro and
Right, that interlude.
I
I
love
mean,
that stuff.
people hear it in different ways. Especially the thing Tane put on it. He has his own
Yeah,
he puts his own metric stuff on top of what I. But
yeah,
the way I wrote it anyway is it's like it's kind of fives,
yeah.
but it's like. 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 and then
And a six, right?
a six
Yeah,
exactly. So
exactly.
okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
but you can think of it as just one too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Tain does. I still haven't figured out what Tain did, but it was very very creative because that's the thing I love about Jeff
Yeah,
because I've played that tune with different drummers. And they play the fives with me, the 1 2 3 4 5, dun dun
yeah,
dun 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 dun. They play it perfectly, but Jeff doesn't do that. He does something else that kind of fits with that. So
yeah. He's
that's the beauty of the genius of Tain.
yeah,
He adds something to the rhythm, like he reharmonizes in a
yeah,
rhythmic sense.
yeah. He's such a monster, man. I mean,
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you, like, because I mentioned E and all these songs, like,
right.
what's your approach when you write? Like, let's say we're talking about Water now, like the
Yeah.
5 and 6. How do you start composing? Or like do like improvise or like and then write out stuff?
Yeah.
Or
It's that's a good question, and there's a lot of different ways that I
Hmm,
do it. I mean, it's not always the same way. Sometimes I start with a melody, like just singing a melody in my head on the piano. Sometimes I start with a progression,
hmm,
like a chordal progression, and sometimes I start with a rhythm.
yeah,
And then sometimes I start with all three or two or different combinations. But so it's always different. On Water, specifically on Water, that I remember I was on tour somewhere, some country, and I was practicing during the day. I think I went over to the venue and they had a keyboard with a action that wasn't weighted. So it was very easy to
yeah,
play, almost too easy, like an organ. And I was messing around with, so you could on a grand piano, you have to really dig in.
Yeah,
This was just like playing an organ, very easy. And I was sort of just bouncing around between my left and right hand, coming up with a rhythm. So it was almost like a little drum pattern, and my hands, and I picked out a wide voicing with fifths, a lot of fifths.
Yeah.
1, 5, a fifth above that, and then maybe a fifth above that, and then a lot of like an open voicing. And I just started bouncing around with sort of a pseudo Brazilian rhythm, and then I started looping it. And I wasn't trying to. Usually, when I come up with odd meter songs, I'm not thinking odd meter. I'm usually just thinking like, I mean, Frank Zappa used to say in an interview, he doesn't think of odd meters. He just thinks of one, like one, and then whatever happens, and then one. And sometimes I avoid doing odd meters because I like to keep things simple. But on that one specifically, and many times with my songs, I just think of a rhythm, and then later I'll either record it, and then it's like, oh wow, that's weird. That's 5, and then it's 9, and then it's 4.
Exactly.
Then I got to figure it all out and write it out, and then it's like, oh, another tricky tune. But basically, I try to keep it. I'm trying to keep it simple and spontaneous, and but sometimes later I figure out if it's in 4, or if it's in 5 or 6 or 7.
I mean, it sounds natural, but
right. That's what I'm striving for. I want it to be
like,
natural.
Yeah.
I want it to sound natural, because I'm not crazy about when there. I mean, now I think it's changing, but there was, and I don't know if you remember. You probably remember. There was a time when everyone was writing odd meter tunes.
I wrote like tunes like this,
right, and it was like, oh, wait a minute. It's so, then it's like, great tune, but like, who's going to play it? You got to be like a genius just to get through the first page.
Yeah, man, I remember one of my first records I did with Taishan, sorry,
Oh, yeah.
And, we had the first gig, and all the tunes were like this, changes, constant meter changes. On the second gig, he played everything without looking at the sheet music.
Oh my God!
I was like, man,
okay. That's heavy.
And he was playing it actually, like going everywhere. I was like, man, what's happening? I was sweating all over, like, man, struggling there, like. But
that's great. That's so cool.
But I know what you mean. This,
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, that's the thing. You mentioned the new record in Boris. Boris is like that.
Really?
He's real, and that's with Boris. He's really good at the odd meter stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked him, like, how'd you get so good at that? Because there's great players out there that don't. They just never play odd meter stuff unless they're doing take 5 or something. But even then, it's not part of their world. Yeah. And they're great players with great careers, and
Schofield,
and they just don't want to go there. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, like Schofield. I mean,
he doesn't do it that much either, right?
He's the best. One of the best.
Right.
I don't think he ever played like that. Maybe once or twice.
Right. That's a good point. And he's very modern and contemporary.
Sure,
he's not like an old style player. But so there's people like him, and then there's people that just they're very happy to. And I respect them, and I'm in a way I'm like that. They're happy to play Cherokee and Body and Soul for the rest and rhythm changes for the rest of their life. And some of those guys are my favorite players. Yeah. So I'm not. It's just it's interesting how I was talking to a piano player buddy, and he was saying, "Oh, you're really good at the odd meter," and I'm like, "Well, there's people way better than me." And he's like, "Yeah, I just don't do that." And I'm thinking, like, it's actually, I mean, when did Dave Brubeck write all those odd meter tunes? That it's like what 60, 70 years
Yeah,
old.
exactly.
So so it's not like it's pretty actually old fashioned
In a way,
in
yeah,
a
right.
way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
people, it's interesting how some people, that's I guess that's the beauty of jazz.
Yeah.
There's so many different things you can do, but you don't have to do everything if you don't want to.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
That's you cannot master it all. Also, I mean, that's the fact.
yeah,
It's like it's
yeah,
But Dave, I wanted to ask you this. You mentioned now like Zappa also and Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
right.
And, and you seem to be influenced by a lot of different kinds of music. But I
Right.
wanted to ask you in your upbringing, like musical development, let's say in the mid 70s or somewhere probably there, who were like
Right.
the piano players or which jazz musicians were the first guys who like
Okay.
you said like, oh fuck man, what is this? I want to play that.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, my father was, was a part-time musician. So, and he played, he was good for a part-time musician, and so he played a little bit in the style of he played a bit in the style of Duke Ellington
Oh,
and Count Basie. Those were his guys. I mean, he couldn't play like them, but he knew a little bit of that stuff. So I guess that was the first kind of, and a little boogie woogie and stuff. So that was kind of the first, but that was the first thing I got into with him. But
yeah.
as far as guys that I would listen to on record that really inspired me, when I was young, when I was trying to develop my just learn the basics, would be I guess Bud Powell.
Yeah.
When I first started buying records of jazz piano players, I was very much influenced. The piano players that were influencing me were people like Bud Powell. I really liked McCoy Tyner.
Yeah.
I really liked Chick Corea. I really liked Herbie Hancock, Wynton Kelly, Bill Evans. Pretty
Yeah,
much the same
like
people I like now.
yeah, yeah,
Some things never change.
yeah.
But yeah,
Did you ever check out like
Thelonious Monk.
yeah?
Thelonious Monk.
What about Cecil and stuff like that?
Yeah,
More old
I
stuff?
bought when I was in high school, I bought this record called Unit Structure.
Oh sure, yeah. Come
Remember
on.
that
Yeah.
one?
Oh, sure.
Because everyone was saying, okay, avant-garde piano.
It's quite
And
structured.
I
Actually.
wanted to know. I wanted to
Yeah.
know what was that. And actually, I had my father started bringing me to this teacher who taught my father, who was a professor at Manhattan School of Music.
Oh wow.
And he showed me some different things that my father didn't know. And so we were studying everything from Bach, analyzing Bach and classical music.
Yeah.
But he also got me into, I had to write, we got into serialism and 12-tone music.
Oh wow.
So he had me composing my own 12-tone compositions
That's cool.
and rows. So I was doing that with my teacher, and then so I was like, okay, 12-tone, Arnold Schoenberg,
Yeah.
blah blah blah, and then I was like, okay, well, who is the jazz guy well, he wasn't a 12-tone pianist, but for my ears, the avant-garde and 12-tone stuff kind of went hand in hand,
Yeah.
compared to Errol Garner or something, So I went and bought unit structures, and I was trying to analyze that, and I was saying, it's really not that out. It's
Yeah.
pretty,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's pretty in.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but I don't have that many of his CDs, but I really liked it, and it was kind of an influence.
Yeah.
And people like Lenny Tristano,
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
you know, and Keith Jarrett, of course. And but I really liked, I was, you know, like I said, I was playing in rock groups. So I was hearing rock and roll pianists that had a jazz influence, such as Keith Emerson, and also George Duke.
Oh yeah, sure.
From
Yeah,
Frank
sure.
Zappa was a big influence. You know, I had, you know, then I started buying all the stuff he was doing in the jazz world. That I, you know, even to this day, a lot of jazz pianists aren't that hip to some of the George Duke stuff, because he did play with Cannonball Adderley, and he did a lot of records with Cannonball in the 70s, in between gigs with Zappa. And then he also did stuff with Sonny Rollins, and he also did stuff with
Billy
Joe
Cobham.
Henderson.
Yeah,
He did stuff with Joe Henderson. So I was getting all those records. I mean, a lot of times, you know, they might be doing a Stevie Wonder tune and he might be playing Fender Rhodes, but it was still jazz.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a big influence. But since you were talking about in piano jazz influences, but to clarify, I was listening to a lot of saxophone players when I was learning jazz in the beginning. The pianist that I just mentioned, of course, but I for some reason I always liked. I mean, I played a little bit of saxophone, and I do play alto, and I was playing clarinet a bit and recorder with my dad, because my dad played tenor also. So I went towards saxophonist, as far as like guys I would try to learn lines, a lot of Coltrane and a lot of Charlie Parker. You know, I like the idea of taking melodies and influences from horn players and applying it to the piano. Because it kind of came, and I think Bud Powell did that with Charlie Parker.
Sure.
So I tried to do that with Charlie Parker too. And Coltrane.
Yeah, you hear that in your lines when you play.
I like that kind of approach.
Yeah, it's I did the same with Ornette. You know, like.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I transcribed like 20 or 25 solos from the quartet. You know, like.
Oh wow.
The Atlantic records, and I was just obsessed for one time, and just the melodic.
With Ornette, with his lines and his melody.
Man.
Wow, and how does that sound? Just amazing.
I mean, I still have them, all those tunes, you know, Congeniality, and you know.
Right. I need to get more into Ornette. I mean, I know Keith was really into Ornette.
Yeah.
You know, and he played soprano, and sometimes when he plays soprano, you can hear that influence. But and I love Ornette, but I need to study him a bit more, because I don't you know, I keep seeing songs and like, wow, this is a rhythm changes. I need to check this one. I never heard this one, but you know, when I was younger, I was more into Dolphy. I gravitated more to Dolphy than Ornette, but you know, so you know, even now there's a lot of music that I'm like, wow, I never really checked that out. But you know, that's the way jazz is. That's beautiful. You know, I have like little holes in my listening experience where I'm like, wow, I just never got around to that.
Me too.
You know, like you know. So, but that's fun. You can always go back and check out different things, and it's like, wow, it sounds different to me than it did before. You know.
Yeah, it's amazing. I had a phase now during this lockdown of Herbie Nichols. You know.
Right. Yeah. It's funny you should mention that.
One of those guys who, like, you know, he's really underrated. Like some people talk about it. And I was like, man, what a player, what a composer. You know, I really listened to everything he did. Like, man. Right.
Don Sickler. Maybe I'm not sure if you heard about it yet, but if not, I will tell you. Don Sickler got a bunch of piano players. Good ones too, like Sullivan Faulkner and many different piano players, myself included, and we did a little tribute. Well, not a little one, a big one. he got all these great piano players to
wow.
do a tribute to Herbie Nichols,
Oh man, that's
and
beautiful.
each guy did one song.
Oh wow, that's
I'm trying to
beautiful.
remember the name of the song that I played. I'm sure you would remember. I can't remember it right now, but everyone did one Herbie Nichols song solo piano.
And is it
So
out already
hopefully,
or?
no,
Oh,
it's
okay.
not out.
Cool. I have to check it
Hopefully
out.
that will come out like in the next year
That's
or
beautiful.
something. And I knew Herbie Nichols, but
Yeah,
not
exactly.
not that much, not
That's
that
amazing.
much.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
I was a little more familiar with Herbie Hancock,
Yeah.
but than Herbie Nichols. But no, I checked him out a bit. So
Yeah.
when Don Sickler told me about it, I was like, oh yeah. And he found all these songs, and some of them were never recorded,
Oh
and
wow, beautiful.
because he was, as you know, he was sort of like a unsung, one of the
Yeah,
many unsung heroes.
yeah, exactly.
So let's watch for that one. That'll be
Oh
coming
man,
out. I'm
super.
curious to
Looking
hear what all
forward.
these piano players do. But so I got a little more into him too. He was
That's beautiful.
great. It reminds me of Monk a little bit, but
Yeah,
very
but
original,
yeah,
different,
his
different.
own. Yeah,
His own thing, right?
yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah,
But Dave, I wanted to ask you, like, since we're talking about this kind of upbringing in a way,
yeah,
musical. What I know you went to Berklee, and
yeah.
what did Berklee do to you musically? And I mean,
It ruined me.
what was that like?
No, no,
That was it. That was
no,
the
no,
end
no,
of
no.
it.
I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
kidding.
sure.
I'm just kidding. I mean, it was interesting because before I went to Berkeley, I was trying to prepare, and I was learning. I was trying to learn. It was just a phase I was in, which I'm sort of still in. I was trying to learn all the Charlie Parker heads.
Hmm.
I mean, he wrote so many different ones
Yeah,
over rhythm changes and blues,
yeah,
as you know,
yeah,
which is sort of common knowledge. But I was thinking like, oh, I got to learn all these heads, and then try to put them in all the different keys,
oh
and
shit,
that'll give
yeah,
me a good foundation on bebop, which is, for me, it's kind of like everything is in bebop.
yeah,
But when I got there, everyone was playing Donnelly and Anthropology, and that was
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So and Confirmation. So I was like, oh, okay. But I was kind of glad that I did it, and I'm still working on that stuff because
yeah,
it's like
it's
you
man,
think
yeah,
you know it, but I thought I knew it, but then you go to the piano and then you put on Bud Powell or Charlie Parker. And it's like, no, I do not know this stuff. I
yeah,
need to keep studying because bebop. It's like it's like 1,000 lifetimes, and
yeah, it's
there's
beautiful.
still more. When it comes to Charlie Parker
Parker
and
is
Monk
amazing.
and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and and, and Bud Powell and Dizzy and Fats Navarro and Thelonious Monk, and
yeah,
it's just it's fast. It's for me it's the most fascinating thing in the world. And but so that's what I was thinking about right at the time I started going to Berkeley. And then but then you know um, you have to do your auditions and
hmm,
stuff so they can place you in
yeah,
the classes. And my sight reading was not that great, so they put me in all these like beginner ensembles. But then after they heard me improvise, they said, "Oh, well, you should be in a better
yeah,
class, more advanced class." So eventually, I got moved around to some great classes, like I had a lot of classes with George Garzone,
oh man,
and
yeah.
which is he's one of my favorites.
You
And
played with
we
him
still
also.
we still play
Yeah, yeah.
recently we've been still playing and together
Oh wow.
sometimes, and he's great. And so I learned a lot from him. And then Bob Mover
Oh
was
yeah.
one of my teachers, and I learned a lot from Bob. And we but at the same time he was giving me gigs. I started playing with his band around
Oh wow, man.
Boston, even back then. But so I had some really good teachers like those guys.
Yeah.
And my piano teacher, was very. I learned a lot from my piano teacher too. My private instructor was Ray Santisi, and Ray Santisi. Later, I was really proud because later I found out he taught Keith, and Keith talks about
Oh
it
yeah,
in his
yeah.
book, and
Right.
and I was reading Keith's book and getting inspired and just reading
Yeah.
about Keith and and he was and then I was thinking about some of Keith's songs and some of my transcriptions of Keith and some of the stuff like he does with his left hand
Yeah.
and just different musical concepts. I'm like, he got that from Ray Santisi because I remember Ray telling me you should do this with your left hand, etc., etc. So I was thrilled because as I was trying to learn, from transcribing some Keith Jarrett stuff,
Yeah.
I was thinking about what the direction that Ray Santisi was leading me with
Yeah.
voicings and concept for harmony and reharmonization, etc.
Yeah.
So I was kind of
Mm.
trying to put those things together and saying like, okay, good, this is a nice direction for me to try and work on.
Yeah.
So and according to Keith's book, he liked Ray and he learned some stuff from Ray. So, and I definitely did.
Yeah.
He's got a great concept for reharmonization, and he liked me. So he would say, "Don't show this to anyone." But he would. There was one song, "My One and Only Love,"
Yeah.
which he has great reharms
Oh
for,
really?
and
Oh, man.
what he did, he gave them to me. And he said, don't as long I will show you this as long as you don't record it."
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
so I ended up recording it, but I didn't do his reharms. By then I had my own thing on it. But
Yeah.
there may be a little bit that comes out just naturally from him. But I really tried to change it around. But because the reason he told me that is he showed these reharmonizations, according to him, he showed it to Joe Zawinul.
Oh really?
And Joe
Oh,
Zawinul
man.
recorded it on his first solo record.
Oh shit! Yeah, he plays.
So when you go back and listen
Yeah,
to
exactly.
it,
Oh
those
shit!
are
Yeah.
Ray's reharmonizations.
Oh wow, man.
So yeah, I think it's for those changes. It's basically me, Zawinul, and Ray Santisi, but it all comes from Ray.
Oh
I
man.
don't know. I don't think he showed Keith.
Did he
Anyway,
play "My One and Only Love" on any record? I think
I don't think so.
he didn't, right? No, I'm thinking.
Right? He probably would have if Ray showed him those changes.
Yeah, he would do it. Oh, that's so cool.
That's funny, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. But after Berklee,
So that was Berklee.
I wanted to ask you after Berklee because I've been listening to "In the Idiom" by Randy, right? And this is
Right.
that's one of the first records you did, right?
That is my first. I mean, I did a couple like Berklee
Type, yeah.
records
Okay.
around that time, but my first real record, recording was the record I did, "In the Idiom." That was the first one.
How did this one happen? I mean, because it's like Ron Carter, Joe Henderson, and Al Foster. It's like I would die
Yeah.
if I enter into that studio
I know.
at age 25, or it's like.
Right. I think I was 23 or 24.
Oh, man.
I was really lucky. I think looking back, I was really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. But actually, I kind of already had my big break with Roy Haynes.
So Roy was before. Okay.
So yeah. So what happened was, I started playing with Roy Haynes
How did that
about
happen, by the
a
way?
year in '86. Within a year of getting out of Berklee and moving back to the New York area. Since I'm from New Jersey,
Yeah.
I moved back to New Jersey, and I guess it was within that year of moving back after leaving Boston. I got the gig with Roy Haynes.
And how did Roy find out about you? Like,
So I was playing with Roy Haynes at this place called the Whippoorwill,
oh yeah,
and which it wasn't open for that long,
yeah,
as you know, as you probably know. And I was playing with Roy Haynes, and I remember my ex-wife Cecilia said, "Man, during the set, you know, Randy Brecker was checking you out. You know, he was sitting there watching you. He looked like he was really getting into it." And so I looked. I said, "Where's Randy Brecker's not here." So I looked over, and I was like, "That's not Randy Brecker." You know, because I didn't, I haven't seen him for a while
Yeah.
and stuff. I never saw him in person anyway, just on, but I was a big fan of the Brecker brothers. I guess everybody was. But, sure enough, it was Randy. And he was really nice to me. And he was sitting with Ileana Elias.
Oh, yeah.
Her I recognized. I was like, "You're right, because that's Ileana. That's
Yeah.
the wife of Randy." And so what happened was he called me like the next day, and then when he was saying, I was thinking, "Wow, this is amazing, Randy. I love the Brecker brothers."
Oh, the Brecker brothers. Oh, man.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be some funky stuff, And then he was like, "Oh no, I'm going to do a straight ahead record."
Man.
And then I was like, I wish it was Brecker Brothers with Michael. That would be amazing,
Yeah.
And so, but then I was like, "Well, who's in the band?" And when he said Joe Henderson, I was like, "What?" Ron Carter and Al
Yeah.
and I was like in heaven. It was just like, so that was really getting the gig with Roy Haynes, and then meeting all those, starting to play with all those guys. They were all my hero. Every one of them was like my heroes.
Sure.
And when I was at Berklee, if you told me, there was one person I played with at Berklee who came to one of my gigs and who brought his Fender Twin reverb and a little amp because he heard me playing at a place called Riles in Inman Square.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. Was Pat Metheny. So that there was one like heavyweight who came and he said, "Can I play a tune with you?" And he came up and played the whole night with me
In Boston.
and I did, in Boston. So that was one like heavyweight that I was lucky enough to play with in Boston. And later when I was playing with Roy Haynes, we did a couple CDs together with Roy Haynes and Christian McBride, but that was late. That came later. So, but yeah, getting back to Boston, that was, you make a connection, and then later, Roy Haynes said, after I got the gig with Roy, he said, "I didn't know you knew Pat Metheny." I said, "Yeah, he sat in with my trio in Boston," and he was like, "He's very, Roy said Pat was very excited that that we're playing together and that I'm using you in my band, blah blah blah." So I was thrilled. And then later we recorded, like years later. He said, "Oh, I'm going to get Pat on this next record." So it was kind of like a reunion.
And
So that's Metheny.
Yeah, Metheny. Yeah.
Before that, we were. I jumped back to Boston for a minute, but we were talking about in the idiom, right? So what happened? So what happened was then the idea that I would be. I mean, I got a hint playing with Metheny, but my point was, if you would have told me I would be playing with, that Ron Carter and
those guys,
and Al Foster. See, at that time, I would go to the Blue Note, from New Jersey. I would go to the Blue Note and sit in at the jam sessions, and Herbie Hancock was playing trio, and I would bring my little Walkman and try to record Herbie playing and try to transcribe what he was playing. And in his band was Ron Carter and Al Foster. So those were like the top. That was the top of the top.
That's
So
right.
when Randy said, "Oh, Al Foster, you know, and Ron Carter is the rhythm section," and I'm, you know, sitting there with my Walkman and my Herbie tapes,
Yeah.
I was like, I have to play with Herbie's rhythm section and Joe Henderson and Randy Brecker. Damn, that's talk about a challenge. So, but you know, that's when you have to like kind of say like, in a way, okay, forget about Herbie Hancock.
Yeah.
I need to play the piano. There's no Herbie Hancock there to play. I have to do my own thing and try to make some music with those guys.
Yeah.
So Randy really hooked me up, you know,
Yeah.
as well as Roy Haynes.
And how was that session like? I mean, like this first one. I mean, like, did it go
It
smoothly?
it was amazing. I mean, it was amazing. Randy wrote all these great tunes.
Yeah.
And Joe respected Randy in a way. There was one tune that had some real like demented Brecker Brothers weird upper structure changes, and you know, Joe's the king of that stuff because Randy kind of learned it from Joe. But you know, Randy's got his own twist. I remember Joe kept coming to the piano and saying, you know, I had a pack of Marlboro on. I was, you know, a smoker back then. Joe would say, "Can I have a cigarette?" I'd say, "Please, Mr. Henderson, help yourself." So he'd smoke my cigarettes, and then, "Can you play those chords for me again?" And then he told Randy on one of the tricky tunes. He said, and Joe would just play amazing, and I would just play the chords for him. And he was shedding the chain. He said, Randy, I know this song has something in it. I just haven't found it yet, you know. And I'm saying, like, well, if he hasn't found it yet, when he finds it, it's going to be dangerous.
Oh, man.
And he found it, you know. And Randy was, you know, Randy was great. You know, he's like, "Joe, it's so great to play with you. You know, I'm always playing with my brother Mike, but now it's such a nice change to play with you." And Joe is just sort of like, Mike who? You know, it's like saying like, "Oh, my brother Michael Brecker." And Joe is just like, "Yeah, well, whatever," you know. So I was like thinking, you know, Mike and Joe. I mean, they're the.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like hanging out with my heroes, and Al Foster. You know, he's talking about Tony. And Ron one time, Ron was like, "Oh, during the Dave, like." I'm like, okay, Ron remembered my name. That's a start. And I'm hearing through the headphones, "Hey, Dave, do me a favor. During the bass solo, don't take a nap." You know?
Oh, wow.
Okay, I guess he wants me to comp for him. You know, I was trying to be very subtle in space and play a chord ever so lightly. He was like, "Don't take a nap during my solo." And I was like, "Oh shit," you know. But you know, you can't afford to get nervous on those dates.
Yeah.
You know, but just hearing them talk back and forth among themselves, and even someone like, you know, Joe was supposedly challenged by the chords. You know, when you're hearing that stuff, it kind of makes you feel like, okay, these guys, they're all human.
Yeah.
They're superhuman, but they're human. You know what I mean? So. You know, you learn so much doing those kind of.
That's the university, you know, right? Yeah. Basically.
Yeah, sessions. You know, even now when I do a recording, you know, no matter who it's with, you know, I in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know, if I start getting nervous, you know, in the back of my mind, I'll say, well, wait a minute. I recorded with Joe Henderson and Ron, you know, and so you know, so. Just relax and do your job, you know.
Sure.
But I think, you know,
that's amazing.
Yeah. You know.
But you mentioned Roy. I wanted to ask you, like, because the Roy gig happened before Randy, right? Like,
right.
How did Roy find out about you, and like how did that story happen? Like
the way that happened was I was playing with a drummer by the name of Les DeMerle. Have you heard of him?
No. I know him.
Okay, Les DeMerle, excellent drummer. He kind of he was kind of coming out of to my ears, the school of like Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa kind of thing, and I think he became successful. I think he used to play with a swing trumpet player. He used to play with Harry James.
Okay.
So yeah, I think he used to play with Harry James, and so but he was putting good bands together with people like Dick Oates on saxophone. Dick Oates was on saxophone, and in Boston he would. But he would put together like New York bands, and Boston people, and so I was working with him in Boston and a few gigs. And when I came back to New York, we were still in touch, and he got a gig near Roosevelt, Long Island, which is where Roy Haynes lived.
Oh,
so
wow.
We were like a few towns over. I think it was called the Burgundy Cafe or something like that. We were playing in a near right outside of Roosevelt, Long Island, near Roy's house, and for some reason, I guess Lester Merle knew that Roy lived nearby and called him, and supposedly later on he told me, well, I told Roy, I have a great piano player. You should come check out my band. The piano player is great. The guitarist is great, blah, blah, blah. So sure enough, Roy Haynes came walking in. He was sitting at the bar having a drink, and all of a sudden he walks by. He's on his way to the bathroom, and I'm playing like a DX7 or something, and we're doing, some funny stuff. And then he was at the bar, and I was like, wow, Roy Haynes.
Yeah.
And like I said, we were talking about Charlie Parker.
Yeah,
I had all the Charlie Parker records, and even when I was like 13, 14, Roy was always one of my favorite drummers.
Yeah.
And I had Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, the Chick Corea record. Sure. That was one of my go-to records. Plus I had, To the Beat of a Different Drummer, the Coltrane reissue that came out. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's not Elvin. Wow, that's Roy Haynes. So Roy was already one of my top favorite drummers. So, I asked him, can I buy you a drink? Can I buy you a drink at the bar? And he said, oh, you want to buy me a drink? And I said, yeah, that's why I'm asking you. And then we just started talking. I bought him a drink. We started talking, and I said, are you playing anywhere? And he said, I'm playing at the Blue Note. I'm doing a Monday night at the Blue Note in a few months from now. And I said, oh, I want to come see you play with your band. Like, who's in it?
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, oh, well, do you know Ralph Moore? And as soon as he said Ralph Moore, I was like, that is a connection. Because Ralph and I were playing a lot, and we're pretty good friends.
Oh, yeah.
In Berklee. Okay, now Ralph was living in Boston then, and Ralph was one of the best saxophone players. Yeah, sure. And plus, I mean, he was like one of the, he's still one of my favorites.
Yeah.
He was one of the hot young saxophone players. It was like George Garzone and Bergonzi and then Ralph Moore as far as and in Boston, at least the people that I knew at the time, and Billy Pierce and people like that, as far as tenor players. So I was like, oh, Ralph's my homeboy, whatever, we're tight, man. We're like this, So, oh, Ralph? I'm like, yeah, I know Ralph. We play a lot. So I was hoping he would maybe say something to Ralph. And I think I think he did. I never really asked Ralph directly, but I think he probably said, Dave can play.
Yeah.
So, or we're friends or something. And so, and that was that. And then the next day, the phone rings and he said, because I gave him my number at the end.
Sure.
And he said something, sometimes I do jam sessions at my house. But I never thought he was going to call me.
Sure. Yeah, man.
And the next day he calls, he says, I bet you, hello, this is Roy Haynes. I bet you're surprised that I called you so fast. And I said, I'm surprised you even called me ever. And he said, you want to do the jam session? So I'm thinking, so I'm like, oh yeah. I brought my Fender Rhodes out there. We played like All the Things You Are. Ralph wasn't there. And man, talk about nervous. Ralph wasn't even there. It was just trio. Dave Jackson, the bass player, was there. Dave did some of the gigs, but not that many, a couple, back when I first joined the band. He's not on any of the records I did, but I think he's on some other records. Anyway, so I'm like, where's Ralph? And he's like, Ralph ain't here. So I'm like, damn, I got to play the melodies and everything.
Oh, shit, yeah.
So, it's a little different.
Definitely.
And I had my Fender Rhodes, but I forgot the sustain pedal.
Oh, shit.
And I said, "Oh, Mr. Haynes, I'm really sorry, but I forgot my sustain pedal." And he says, "You're not going to need that with me." And then I was like, "Duh." And then he was like, and this is what he said. He said, "I like a chicky Bud Powell kind of a thing." And I'm thinking, okay, that's good because those are like two of my favorites.
Yeah.
Those are two of my guys right then and there. And, I had a lot of like cassette tapes. I used to tape stuff off the radio. So there was a few obscure chick tunes, like one, and I was into Monk. So the ironic thing was, I was in the right place at the right time. But the other thing that helped me was, I liked liking Monk, liking Bud, and liking Chick. There was a few tunes that he pulled out all these charts, and he pulled out this chart of a Chick tune called Mirror Mirror, which I've recorded and even played it with Chick once with Roy.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Yeah. Like four hands on the piano with Roy and Petitucci,
Oh, man.
There's some YouTubes of that stuff.
Oh, shit,
anyway, it's pretty funny. But there was so he had that chart, Mirror Mirror, and then he had, and this is all with Chick's handwriting, copies, originals. That it was before computers and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there were no scanners. It was all original, written out with Chick. His beautiful calligraphy. I don't know if you saw Chick's calligraphy.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And then he had Mirror Mirror, and then he also had Trinkle Tinkle.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I knew Chick's version of Trinkle Tinkle, and I knew Monk and Train's version of Trinkle Tinkle. And he had Mirror Mirror and a couple other obscure Chick tunes like Up on the Wire. And that Chick didn't record yet, but I had some. There was some because he did a few like cassette. When they do something that they didn't record, but you tape it off the radio. I had a few cassettes like that, which I was like, I'm going to learn this. Nobody knows this one. So when I went out there, I wasn't cocky. I was nervous, but I was like, oh, I don't need that chart. He's like, what do you mean, Chick? How do you know that? Chick never even recorded it yet. And I'm like, oh, I have a tape. I have a cassette.
Oh, man.
And what about Mirror Mirror? What about Trinkle Tinkle? I'm like, no, I don't need that one. I know it. Yeah, but Chick plays it a different way. And I'm like, oh, I know Chick's version. So like I knew a lot of the songs.
Oh, you did your homework, yeah.
Yeah. So it was just I just happened to be into that stuff and did some homework, I guess. So after we play, but we played like All the Things You Are. He just went tang to tang. Let me play whatever you want right about here. Ting to tang, ka-tang, tang, tang, to tang, and whatever you want, tang. He just started playing, and I just played like whatever, All the Things You Are.
Yeah.
And then we did those, and then after we played one or two, he said, "Do you want to go to Europe?" He said, "You're a mofo," the real way, the real word. He said, "You're a mofo." I don't want to curse on the TV on the video. You're a mofo. Do you want to go to Europe with an old man? And I mean, he was probably my age, he was probably 50, 60 then. But to me, I was a kid. So he said, "You want to go to Europe with an old man?" And so I was like, yeah, of course. And then I said, "What about the Blue Note?" I said, "What about the Blue Note?" And he goes, "Oh, you want the Blue Note too?" And I was like, "Well, if I'm going to go all the way, if I'm going to go to Europe, to me, like playing at the Blue Note with Roy Haynes
come on, sure.
was like the top. That was it. I could die tomorrow, So I was like, he said, "Oh, you want the Blue Note too?" And I said, "Yeah, is that okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, you can have the Blue Note too. You go to Europe with me." So that was it. And then, so I guess the ironic thing, the cool thing about it is, I started going to Europe I went to Europe with Roy, did the Blue Note. Then Randy heard me. So the second tour of Roy Haynes was like within 6 months.
Oh, wow, man.
Within 6 months, we did the second tour of Europe. And we did the first record with Roy Haynes called True or False.
True or False, yeah.
It's
Limehouse
in
Blues, man.
86.
You kill on Limehouse Blues, man. That's your
Oh,
solo.
Limehouse Blues?
Man.
Oh, you like that one. Thank you.
Man,
Thank
your
you.
solo there, it's like, whew.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and Ralph too.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Limehouse Blues, and but the same week, that was a good week because that was the same week I did the record with Randy Brecker, like on a Monday, the one with Joe Henderson, like on a Monday or Tuesday. I think we did 2 days in the studio for Denon, Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday, I went to Europe. We went to Paris, played at this place, Magnetic Terrace, for a week in Paris.
Oh, wow.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
And then I think on the Friday night, we recorded the live album. So I did both those records in the same week.
Man, talk about the beginning.
That was a good week. That was a good week.
That's an understatement.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And how were the first tours with Roy like in Europe?
I mean, it was my first time in Europe. It was my first time traveling anywhere besides Boston. So just that was, going to Europe was great, doing the Blue Note with Roy, then going to Europe. I'm trying to remember first was the Blue Note. And then going to Europe, we're going to Europe. It was after. And it was just great to be, playing with a jazz, it was like going to school every day, but,
man.
Way better than, no offense to Berklee, but, this is the real thing, playing with someone like Roy Haynes, and he's talking about Bird and Monk, and he played with everyone. He's talking about Bird, talking about all my heroes, Bird, Train, Monk,
So he told stories and
Chick,
stuff. And
Matheny, Train, he played with everyone, and Miles. He was in like Miles's first band. They left Charlie Parker at the same time because
that's incredible.
Bird sometimes was a little flaky about giving them the money, so Miles and they all left they left Bird at the same time. Just and Roy was like playing like what Tony Williams later started doing. Roy was like doing that kind of stuff like back when they were playing with Bird even. And so later when when Roy heard Miles's new band in the 60s, thinking like, oh, I was breaking up the time, with Miles, way back then,
Sure.
So,
sure. And how was he like as a band leader to you, Ralph, and Ed? Like really liberal or?
Very cool. Very, very, very cool. I mean, you had to take care of business. I mean, if somebody does something he doesn't like, he would just go bap and stop. Could be even a gig.
Oh man.
He could just go bap and stop, like, what chord you playing? Oh, what beat is that? Or I'm going to show you drum. Maybe I should show you how to play drums. But in a warm, sweet, funny way, not mean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Man. And it sounds like you sounds like you learned that tune out of one of those books. And I was like, one time he said that, and I was like, oh God, just crucify me, But he said it in such a nice way. He was right, because I did learn it out of a book, and I need to go to the original recording and really learn it, learn it right, and learn the phrasing, and make sure I learned more from him than probably anyone in my life. Even though he doesn't know, he doesn't play a chordal or a melodic instrument. I still he knows if there's one note missing in the melody, he knows. I mean, Roy knows the words to like songs by the Doors, like Beatles songs, rock songs. He knows the words to like country western songs, anything, hip hop songs. He knows music. It's he's not one of those old bebop jazz guys who just he knows everything. He could sing you melodies of classical pieces. He just knows music, and his solos. I would be in awe every night. I would be like, Roy, that solo was unbelievable. Like, the other guys in the band would be like, don't stroke him so hard. I'm like F you. I'm not kissing his butt. I'm being honest. That was ridiculous. If you don't like it, that's your problem. What's wrong with telling the leader, like, that was ridiculous what you play?
Especially, Roy Haynes.
He'd say, Chicken Miroslav told me I'm doing 5s and 7s, but I just play. And I'm like, you're doing 13 and all the metric stuff, it's just all there. Whether he knows the name or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
People in college can figure out the names of stuff. He just plays everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
That's incredible. Huh?
And just he knew, even if he didn't know the language, like if he didn't, he knew a few words in French. He had a way of getting the promoters and the audiences and the people at the venues to take care of us. He knew how to, even without speaking the language, by his presence, he knew how to get things done, and putting together a set, reading an audience. I learned a lot of that stuff about being a band leader and just dealing with travel, and I learned a lot of that stuff from him. I learned, just how to handle yourself when you're on the road, traveling, on the trains and all that stuff. He's a pro. And he learned it from like the Charlie Parkers, the Coltrane's and stuff.
Yeah. Did Roy, talking about band leading, like I know you did like Presage, which is like with Al and Eddie, and
right. My first song.
Yeah, it starts with Hope, your song, which is amazing. Again, the Cole Porter stuff that you did. But did Roy encourage you to do that? How did you become a band leader? Or did you just? When did you decide to do that?
No, Roy had nothing to do with any of that. But it did have to do with Roy. It had to do with Roy in the sense of, well, number one, John Paul Rodriguez, JP we call him, is French promoter and producer. Mm-hmm. He had a record label called Freelance Records.
Oh yeah.
True or False is on Freelance Records, at least originally.
Yeah.
And my record Presage is on Freelance Records.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So as I was starting to play with these, starting to do recordings as a sideman, I was, I was starting to compose more, and the idea of doing my own record of my own compositions was attractive to me, and so sometime during the tour, I asked John Paul, I'd like to do my own record, and so that's how that happened. He said, he told me, you're very young, and if you get who are you going to use on bass and drums? And he wanted me to use he wanted me to use the best bass and drums that I could get, because he wanted to sell CDs, I guess. And so sort of the obvious, the obvious choice would have been maybe Al. I wanted to use Roy Haynes, but Roy was busy at that time, and he wasn't crazy about the idea of going in the studio. He wasn't even crazy about doing his own records in the studio. Yeah. So he was busy, and Al and Ron. That was the trio I was listening to with the Herbie trio. But I didn't want to. I was listening to that trio so much that I wanted to mix it up a little bit. And since I was listening to a lot to Chick, and I loved Eddie's playing, and I was listening to a lot to Chick and Bill Evans.
Bill Evans, sure.
And at that time, Eddie was playing with Chick at that time, or around that time. Yeah. And Bill Evans. So I was thinking, if I'm going to use like the top of the line rhythm section, I want to mix it up a little bit. So I'll get Chick's bass player and I'll get Herbie's drummer.
It doesn't get better.
So that's what I did. So I think it made it. I mean, but those guys were recording with. There's a record. The two of them were recording with other people. I wasn't the first guy to do that. But to me, it was an original idea. To me, but later I found out that Richie Byrack did a record with. With those two's tribute to Bill Evans. Yeah, and that's Eddie and Al. Yeah, but I didn't know that, so I thought it was kind of an original idea.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful because you've done so much work as a band leader and as a composer, and you have this, I think you have this strong connection with drummers. Talking about Roy, like I have that record by Ralph Moore you did, like in between, I guess, Roy's 62-3 C Street with Billy Hart and Buster, right?
Right. That was maybe a year or so after that, maybe a year or two after. Okay. Not that long after, because Ralph was in the band. Ralph was on Tour Falls. Yeah. So that was a steady band. That was with Ed Howard and Ralph Moore. But then Ralph was just talking about. Well, it was ironic because that was Herbie's other. Herbie's other trio. Section. Yeah. Because the Amwandishi band was Billy Hart and Buster, and Ralph was starting to play a lot with Buster and Billy Hart. Yeah. And so when Ralph Moore asked me would I like to do the record with him, I said of course. And then who are you going to use? So he wasn't sure. So the two of us just were talking. And he just started talking about Buster and Billy, and I was like, "That would be incredible." Sure. So that's how that happened. Yeah. And he's like, "You." I mean, who doesn't like Buster? Who doesn't like Buster? Who doesn't like Billy Hart? They're that's the other top shelf guys,
And
So
you
that
worked
was,
a lot with Billy also, right? I mean, I have
then
that
after
Oceans of Time record of you and Billy.
that came later. In other
Yeah.
words, the first time I played with Billy was Ralph Moore's record.
Yeah.
And then after that, we had a nice time playing together. But a few years later, Billy heard Presage on the radio,
Oh wow. Okay.
and he heard me playing that tune "Dirty Dogs,"
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
on Presage,
Yeah.
and he said, "I want to record your tune
That's how
again,
okay.
Dirty
Wow.
Dogs."
Yeah.
And I heard it on the radio. I didn't know it was you, and he said, I knew you could play, but I didn't know you could write. That's what Billy Hart said. He said, I didn't know you can compose. You know, I love your compositions. So that's when I joined Billy Hart's band, and he really wanted to play two of my songs.
Yeah.
So Billy does his, but I rearrange both of them.
You played Shadow also. Shadow. Yeah.
Shadow and Dirty Dogs. I rearranged both of them. We did one on one record, one on another record. And that was a fun band because, you know, we had
John Stubblefield, right? That was
we had Stubblefield, and we also had Chris Potter.
Yeah. Fuczynski on guitar, right?
Right, and Mark Feldman and
beautiful.
Santi DiBriano. That was a fun band.
Yeah.
So we didn't do that many tours, but we did a lot of gigs in New York and those two CDs.
Yeah.
And Billy Billy recently. There's a video I did that should be that will probably be out on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
When that gets off the ground, it's my quartet, and that was with Billy and Billy played with me, and we actually did Dirty Dogs again in the video with Joe Martin on bass. Sure. And we did that in a studio in New York, but it was for Florida Jazz Society.
Oh wow!
So it was nice that we had a nice. It's a like a video recording. Yeah. So that'll be coming out on video soon.
Oh man, super! I want to hear that. Yeah. It's just you and drummers. It's like it's crazy when I look at your records. It's just like. You know, you played with everyone, you know, Bill Stewart, but, you know, Billy Hart, Roy Haynes, everyone, I think like all the best drummers. But I wanted to ask you about, I think you have a special connection with Tain Watts, who we mentioned. And
yeah.
Well, when did you start playing with Jeff? I mean, because you two guys, I think he's like on 10 records of yours or something like that.
Right. And I'm on a bunch of his too.
Yeah, Detained.
And we're on records with, and we're on a lot of records. Yeah, I'm on his records. He's on quite a few of mine, and we're still playing. We're still doing stuff together.
Oh, wow.
So that's. That goes all the way back to Berklee.
Berklee.
Jeff Tain Watts was one of the first musicians I became friendly with.
Oh wow, that's cool.
And he left Berklee quickly because he started playing with Wynton Marsalis.
Yeah, sure.
But we were good friends. You know, we've been good friends for many years since Berklee, and we used to jam together at Berklee. So Jeff's. I've known Jeff longer than most of everyone, even longer than Roy Haynes.
Sure.
And I guess people like Ralph Moore and Jeff Tain Watts. We knew each other all back in the Berklee days. So and Jeff. Well, what can you say about Jeff? He's kind of like a metric genius. You know, he's.
How do the roles change when, you know, I love his writing, like Sigmund Freud and all those tunes, and, you know. What is that one? JC JC is the man and stuff like that.
JC's the man, yeah.
How do the roles change?
In vaudeville.
Vaudeville, yeah, man. Yeah. Like, how do the roles change when he's a band leader or when you are like?
Oh, it's all well. The main
Playing
thing
his
is,
tunes. I mean,
yeah. When sometimes I do. Jeff played with my band recently, and
oh really?
I threw in a couple of his tunes.
Oh
But
really?
the main, yeah, because he has
He's a
great
master.
compositions,
Yeah.
and and his metric stuff, is like it's like a study in rhythm, and he has some nice melodies too in his compositions. But so sometimes I throw in some of Jeff's tunes, but the main difference is when I'm working with Jeff, we do his tunes. I'm working on his tunes, and so I have to relearn them and study them. And he's always got a new tune. He's such a prolific writer. In fact, I did one of his tunes, which was a new tune. I had to learn a brand new tune called Seven. Instead of seven. It's called Seven, and it's in seven. And that's a new one I had to learn, but it was my gig. And then when he does my stuff, he learns my tunes, and then so that's the main difference is whose songs are you doing? But it's always I always learn something when I play with Jeff, and we're good friends too. We get along.
Yeah,
He's such a, I've been lucky to play with many great drummers.
Yeah,
and
bassists.
One that comes to mind is Ralph Peterson just passed, and I think the record unfortunately I already miss Ralph, and I think the record we did with Wayne Escoffrey. I think that was one of the warrior, the humble warrior. Is one. I think that's one of the that's Wayne's one of Wayne's recent records. That was I think one of the last recordings with Ralph Peterson. And then there's another one called Triangular from like 20 years ago. Which that's we did that together. That was kind of Ralph's project. And that was really fun. When Triangular, I think it's Triangular 1 or Triangular 2. When Ralph passed, I pulled that one out and listened to that, I liked it. I haven't heard it for so long. I don't think I've heard it since we recorded it. And, just because I was feeling sentimental, over missing Ralph, I put that on, and it still holds up. But it was nice to hear that. And then we're on we're on one of Craig Handy's records too.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you played. Yeah, you've played with everyone. You've done so much. It's so beautiful to see what you've done, and it's like so creative.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Appreciate you sharing some of the stories. So.
It's my pleasure. It's fun. It's nice talking about the good old days. And
I'm like a small kid listening to you. I love this stuff. Besides
being
a musician, it's just I love listening to stories and the history. Like it's like you with Roy, probably. It's the same. Like being in a bus with Roy, man. Come on, that's
Yeah, he's because he's played with everyone. I just sit there like a little puppy,
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And like for example, just a little, it's the little things that you kind of remember. Like we're driving on a train. We had to take this train and carry the drums and then two or three trains and a plane and a taxi and a bus all in one day. But we managed to get to the gig, and Roy might pull out his little flask of cognac, nice cognac, and he'd pull out his nice gold flask and look at me and say, "Too early, Dave?" He'd call me K, for Kikoski. Too early, and I'd say, "Nah, it's not too early." We take a little shot, and pass it around, and it's a long day. Let's have a shot, and we get to the gig, and then he'd say, "This reminds me of when we were doing this with Bud Powell." and people
Man.
were asking, how do you play all that music without any sheets in front of you, like a classical musician asked them when they were on tour, and Bud Powell would say, "Oh, we're geniuses. We don't need music," or something like. And Bud Powell was his answer. "Oh,
Yeah,
we're all geniuses. We don't need to read music." So
man.
there's little stories about
Yeah,
all Bud Powell and it's better than a book. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's fun. You hear it from the horse's mouth, so it's really
yeah,
fun.
yeah. I love that. Yeah, it's yeah. You have so many stories. I will not take much of your time. Maybe
Yeah.
there's still Michael Brecker, and there's the record you did with Kenny Garrett and Roy Hargrove, the Birds of Feather and stuff.
Right. Oh, the Brecker. Yeah, the Brecker.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
it's
do we have time?
yeah,
Or
yeah. I mean,
we
can
could
I
go
ask
on
you?
forever. We could go on forever.
I just wanted to ask you about just about Mike Brecker. How was like? I mean,
Okay.
for me, he's one of the biggest heroes for me. Like,
Oh yeah, well, I guess most people would agree on that. I mean, remember I was talking about saxophones and
yeah,
how I would sometimes before I would even transcribe piano
yeah,
stuff, I would always go to saxophone players, but not just any saxophone player. It would be, when I was even in college, it would be like, I mean, I had many saxophonists like Sonny Rollins, Joe
sure,
Henderson, but I mean, it wasn't that big of a list. It was like Coltrane, uh, Charlie Parker, and right there would be, I'd be trying to learn, as much Michael Brecker phrases as I
yeah,
could,
man, yeah,
and try to apply that to the piano. And after I got the gig, with Randy, we started doing tours, and we did a lot of tours opposite. It would be, we'd be doing all the festivals, but it would be sometimes we even traveled, on in the same, planes and buses with the Michael Brecker group.
bro, yeah.
And then there would be
Oh yeah,
the Randy Brecker group. We weren't traveling with Joe Henderson. We were
oh yeah,
the
sure.
traveling band was Bob Berg.
Oh man,
Okay,
that's where the Bob Blue connection comes.
Joey Barron and Dieter Ilg was the traveling band. There's a nice YouTube a
Oh yeah,
professional YouTube that just came out
with
with
Joey.
Live at Sweet Basil with
Oh
Joey
man,
Barron,
oh
Dieter
man.
Ilg.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
Dieter,
they
no, yeah.
got both sets.
Oh
You could
man.
you could see both sets of that particular.
Oh
That was
wow.
the Randy Brecker touring band, which was a great
Oh
band with
man, yeah,
Bob Berg, the late great Bob Berg, and
yeah.
Randy and Bob sounded. We played all the songs from the Idiom
That
and
that's
some others.
that's how you connected with Bob also, because then you did so many
That's how I
records.
connected with Bob. He was
Oh
in the
man, yeah.
touring band. Like
Oh
I
okay.
said, the touring
Yeah.
band of I
Oh
guess
man.
Joe Henderson and those guys were busy.
Sure.
So that's how I hooked up with Bob Berg, Joey Barron on drums, and Dieter Ilg, German
Yeah.
bass player.
Yeah. Wow,
And
man.
the opposite band so that was a nice band. And then we'd be traveling with the band with Michael Brecker,
With Stern and
young Joey
oh man,
Calderazzo
yeah.
on piano. That's how I met Joey. And then Mike Stern, Jeff Andrews on
Yeah.
electric,
And
and
Adam probably,
and
right?
Adam Nussbaum.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So I got to meet Michael, and then eventually, I think the first time we started recording together was my project called. We became friendly, but we never really played together until this project of mine
Oh,
called
Beatle
Beatle
Jazz.
Jazz.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, I know that
So
one.
Brian
Yeah,
Melvin, myself,
yeah. I
we
love that. Yeah.
contacted
It's
we
beautiful.
we contacted Michael, and Michael did a few tracks on just one track on one of the Beatle Jazz records. And then a few years after that, we did. Randy called me and said we're doing a Brecker Brothers
Yeah.
acoustic, and we're going to be playing Straight Ahead
Oh
with
man.
with and I was like, with Michael, and he's like, yeah, and it's like Peter Washington, who I knew, and Carl Allen, and
Oh
we
yeah.
did we did six. I think we did 6 weeks, big
Wow.
long healthy tour, all the festivals, and
Wow.
and playing with Michael like for 6 weeks every night, pretty much every night. That was unbelievable. So we got to become friends,
Yeah.
and That was unbelievable. I mean,
Amazing,
you know,
huh? Yeah.
because that's another one of my heroes
Sure.
that and so I hope some of that stuff. There's there's a lot of YouTubes, and there's a few professional videos. I think
Check it out. Yeah.
there's some nice YouTubes and videos of that band with Peter Washington, Carl Allen, and wow. But I hope we never really got in the studio, so hopefully more of that live stuff will come out.
Be released. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Man. Wow, man. Cool. Dave, thank you so much.
Man,
thank you so much for
you.
sharing.
It was really a pleasure.
Really.
Yeah, let's stay in touch.
Yeah.
Dr. Jazz.